Political theory. This question, even you asked yesterday. What are we talking about in terms of the I was going to say hysterical. In terms of the historical horizon, and also in terms of substance. What exactly does it refer to? So we'll start with the idea of Svaraj again, Svaraj and Indian political theory. Then this very striking statement, the poverty of Indian political theory. Have you heard this statement before? The poverty of Indian political theory. This is Bhikkhu Parekh, Lord Parekh. 3 generations of contemporary Indian political theory. So here I start to discuss, what am I talking about? Contemporary, living. Fantasy and romance. I'll discuss what I mean by that. And then colonialism versus globalization. Might have to skip that section, we'll see. And then conclusions showing which direction we will go forward. So as we, I shouldn't say we when nobody else spoke. As I had stated, Fred Dalmeier's pluralizing efforts through comparative political theory arose internal to the transatlantic university network, addressing the other within. What does that mean? The other within. So diasporas, mass waves of immigration, a new visibility of a demography within the transatlantic world. So who do you think, just to footnote it, are the students of the South Asian studies programs in the transatlantic world? They're largely diasporic, second generation, third generation South Asians. It is reflexive self-understanding and self-correction. Comparative political theory is a reflexive self-understanding and self-correction. What role do I have in a globalizing world? Who is the I? The transatlantic academic. Now, this dependency and constant assimilation of everything that we attempt to do in areas that used to be referred to as the periphery during actual colonization, and that we still recognize as the periphery through the processes of self-colonization that I think we are daily involved with. The example from the JNU journal listing is evidence. These suggest we need an alternative. And so this Svaraj idea, most prominently articulated, in the introduction and the first chapter, I give a history of this concept. But that's your reading, not my job to go through it. Most prominently discussed by K.C. Bhattacharya in Swaraj and Ideas. This Swaraj notion is obviously an attempt to find an authentic and autonomous self-understanding for ourselves. So not a self-understanding and a self-correction for how the transatlantic intellectual should engage with the other without, that's us here, or the other within, that's us when we're diasporic. So that vantage point, let them do it. Let Dalmeier do what he's doing, and he's doing it wonderfully. But that is not going to get us an authentic theorization, either in form or in content. So Swaraj is something that we have to attain in order to establish our own self-correction, self-understanding, authenticity, and autonomy. And yet, some of the greatest political theorists of our country, like Gurpreet Mahajan, make this statement. The project of indigeneity in Indian political thought carries with it methodological assumptions that are false, which essentialize cultures and absolutize difference. So some sort of seeking of authenticity in Indian political theory, some attempt to use this adjective Indian in front of political theory, is an essentialization of what it of Indianness, essentialization of this difference. It's methodologically false, and even worse, a quotation from her 2013 book, India, Making of a Democratic Discourse, published in the UK, looking for an essence or for authentic Indian concepts, looking for an essence or for authentic Indian concepts, Swaraj, in ideas, is therefore, because of methodological falsehood, a misplaced project. And it cannot and must not be the ground for constructing an Indian political theory. Meaning what? Meaning this is absurd. This is an a priori absurdity. Now, I want to ask you a question. Read this sentence. Is a misplaced project and cannot and must not be the ground for constructing. Why do you think she wrote must not? As an academic, if you want to make an argument, you just say it's methodologically false and the assumptions are false, so it can't work. But she didn't say that. She said it can't and it must not. So there's something else going on behind her concern about authenticity and Swaraj. Now, let's look from another point of view, just remembering Gurpreet Mahajan's concern, which is beyond facticity, right? It goes into the question of ought. Gurpreet, by the way, is a friend. I'm not criticizing her. We're going to understand, how does this red thing work? So we're going to understand why it is that I mention people like Gurpreet and Gopal Guru and so on in this book now. It's not to criticize them. I mean, she said this is a terrible book, but she said it in a friendly way. All right. Now, the poverty of Indian political theory. Post-independence India. This is Bhikkhu Parekh's words. So don't get angry with me. I find this offensive, okay? I don't know how you will feel about it. Post-independence India has failed to throw up either a major political theorist or significant theoretical works on such subjects as social justice, the specificity of the Indian state, secularism, legitimacy, political obligation, the nature and structure of political argument, the nature of citizenship in a multicultural state, the nature and limits of the law, the ideal polity, and the best way to understand and theorize the Indian political reality. There is little attempt even to test the major ideas and categories of Western political theory against the Indian political experience and to show their ethnocentric biases and limitations. So you might very well agree with that you can say it all day long, but when have you proved it? Then Indian political theorists do not take each other's work seriously enough to comment on it. Okay? They do not take each other's work seriously enough to comment on it. When I put Gurpreet Mahajan's remarks there and I say that she is wrong, it means that I am criticizing her. This is our academic cultural background. And the problem of that academic cultural background is then we fall prey to this sort of institutional productivity problem. As a result, there is no cooperative engagement in a shared form of inquiry, and as yet, no sign of the development of an Indian tradition of political theory. There is no Indian political theory. This is not Gurpreet Mahajan saying there must not be an Indian political theory. This is Bhikkhu Parekh saying he's saying there must be, but there isn't. And these are the reasons why there he establishes that there isn't. So what is he telling us? He's saying, what on earth are you doing? And he says it in a posh way. He has a very elegant accent. I can't imitate. But you know, just imagine Lord Bhikkhu Parekh's voice. What are you doing with your time? Because you're not doing anything that a political theorist is supposed to do. You have not constructed political theory. You have blamed the West, but you have not shown or proved that they have even done anything wrong. In fact, the only reason that they keep producing the work is to fill a vacuum that you yourself have created. But Gurpreet Mahajan is saying, don't fill that vacuum. We ought not to. We must not. We have a little bit of a conceptual problem here. And this is something that I think you will want to think through. Reading this paragraph from The Poverty of Indian Political Theory got me so angry that I wrote 2 books. Okay. So the first one was called Indian Political Thought, 2010. And no, I didn't write it. It was an anthological work showing, and I organized the chapters of that anthology according to each of these concepts. So if you are familiar with that work, you will see now that the first chapter, major subjects, social justice, specificity of the Indian state, secularism, legitimacy, political obligation. So I use these as ways to show Lord Parekh that what you're saying is not true. We're working on it. Okay? And then he said not good enough because he published another article. And he repeated this passage. It's a different one. I didn't put it on the PowerPoint, but I can give it to you. Where he said, all right, you did a little, but not quite good enough, so get busy. So then I did this book. I said, okay, fine. Let me try again. And then this work comes up. Now, what do I do in this work? We're going to see here. This is a very bad slide, but I'll try to unpack it. So what I try to do is Indian political theorists do not take each other's work seriously enough to comment on it. What I try to do now, so after reading Bhikkhu Parekh, that was about 10 years ago, I threw myself into a study of reading everything that I could find published within the social sciences in India. So all of the work that we were producing in sociology, economics, philosophy, law, political science, and attempted to come up with a framework for understanding what is the state or status of political theory, social and political theory, in contemporary times. So what I'm presenting to you right now is it's not from any syllabus or anything like this. It's just the fruits of my labor trying to disprove Bhikkhu Parekh. Okay? And so many people have problems with how I've laid it out. Nivedita Menon commented that I've made a big mistake by linking some people in this part. I'll explain that in a minute. So there are certainly problems with this methodological approach. But what am I trying to do? Any of you who have read political theory book know contemporary political theory, Will Kimlicka, or political philosophy, any of these major works that are on our syllabus in India, God knows why. Anyone who reads those knows what is each chapter about. It's about themselves, right? It's about themselves. Putnam is doing this. Rorty is doing that. Zizek is saying that. Rawls is saying that. Habermas is saying that. Where is our work like this? If that constitutes political philosophy as it's done in the transatlantic world, in which we import and distribute and teach and spend our time teaching, spend so much time doing that, their work for them, that we don't produce our own, where is our own work like political philosophy in the 20th century or contemporary political philosophy? So I admit that there are some flaws in my presentation, but I don't want you to criticize me. I want you to correct it. Okay? You correct it with your own work. I can't I can't do you know this